My video is on women's roles in the Native American tribes in the 1800s. So it was widely believed that the Native American women were treated way worse than the European women at the time, but that could not have been farther from the truth. They actually held a higher authority in the tribes than the men even did. For example, the elder women, they were the ones that appointed the chiefs. They all had a vote, they were in charge, and they had the men, I guess, represent it because they were good with war, and, that was their role at the time. There were 6 Iroquois nations that had matrilineal descent, which means that the bloodline goes from the mother instead of the father, like it's traditionally was done in the European countries. Because of the motherhood, they would be given political and social authority because it was believed in the tribes that they could create life, and that was like a god-like power. So they were held with pretty high respect. Since men handled the hunting, warfare, and outside scouting and communications, the women managed the internal operations. So they had all the economic, political power, and that sort of thing. They ran the communications on the inside. They owned all the property and the goods, and they had the rights to the children. One person said, quote, "From the Native American perspective, women's roles reflected their own cultural emphasis on reciprocity, balance, and autonomy." From teachinghistory.org. Because of motherhood, they were trusted with keeping the balance and the peace, because, again, motherhood was held as a very respectable job. Like, that was just very important in the community. Also, the Native American women actually helped inspire the women's rights movement. In the late 1800s, the Euro-American culture viewed women as an extension of their husbands, while in the Native American tribes, women were as equals, maybe even a little bit higher at that point. Matilda Gage and Elizabeth Stanton were part of the women's suffrage movement for over 40 years, and they grew up in the land of the Haudenosaunee. So they saw how the women had social, religious, and economic advantages and powers that the European and American women did not. Matilda Gage received an honorary adoption into the Wolf Clan of the Mohawk Nation in 1893, which is that's a pretty cool thing to be adopted into. She was being considered for full voting rights in the chieftainship election of her adopted native culture, but she was arrested for trying to vote in her own. It's pretty interesting. There was a Native American woman named Sarah Winnemucca, who was a great example of a very strong, powerful Native woman in her time. She was a granddaughter of the Paiute chief. She defended them and aided in communications, and she kind of worked with both cultures. Her grandfather's wish was for her to grow to know both cultures so she could work simultaneously with both of them. She immersed herself in the white culture and even aided the Americans in the War of Bannock in 1878. She was an interpreter and scout to the U.S. Army, and she was very respected in both cultures. Eventually, she opened an Indian school and settled down. It's pretty neat stuff. So yeah, the Native American women were definitely held in very high regards, and their culture was absolutely amazing. Anyway, thanks.